Well, hey, and welcome back to The Commonplace. My name is Autumn Kern, and I am back with another video in my dumb phone series. But it's not a dumb phone, it's a great phone. So recently I had the sincere pleasure of joining Tish Oxenreider on her podcast, A Drink with a Friend. And it was to talk about giving up my smartphone and the new life with the dumb phone. And after our conversation, it left me with a few ideas about what has changed that was unexpected. I kind of talk about the two questions that I had in this. Is convenience forming us towards machines? Do we like them more than people? Is the ability to have these tiny computers in our back pocket actually really feeding the lie that we're like God in ways that we're not? Do we think that we're omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent? These have been my two big categories and questions if you've been keeping up with the series, and if not, all the things will be up here, links so you can catch up. But I wanted to do a video about things that have surprised me in my observations. What are some changes that have come about since giving up my phone? And I'm gonna add some commentary to it. I might just drop one and let you take it. But this is just something kind of unique to my life and some of the changes that have come that I never really saw coming. And I have 5 for you today. So let's get started with number 1. Number 1, I now try to ask a person a question instead of Google. So part of this is I don't have Google in my pocket. I can no longer ask, how do I do this thing? How do I take care of this stain? How do I cook this thing? How do I prep this thing? There's really not the option for me to have a quick answer from a machine. And what I've really liked about that is I've started to take note, even more so than I used to, of all of the things that the people I know. What do they know about? What do they love? What have they studied? What have they spent time investing in? And ask them. And I've gotten pushback on this. I get a lot of pushback about the phone, actually. They're kind of like 3 categories of pushback. Maybe that'll be a different video. But I get pushback that, well, that's great that you can ask your friend, but your friend is not the expert. They may not know that much or the best answer to the thing. And don't you want the best answer to the thing? Not necessarily. For sure, there are some categories where you would want to make sure you had like the most up-to-date answer about something like, I don't know, knee surgery. Not something I'm doing. But when it comes to, hey, how do I get this stain out of my couch? My kid just drew all over it with red crayon. Or, hey, I'm trying to redecorate this room and I don't exactly know where my furniture should go. Can you come over and look at my walls for me? Things like that. What I've noticed is that when I ask Google those questions, it doesn't lead me to think about God or worship. That sounds dramatic. A lot of my things do when I talk about the phone, but it's actually not. So when I ask Google an answer, Google is a machine. There's zero relationship between us. It does not foster any warm feelings inside of me. It does not cause me to pause and reflect. It just gives me an answer. I take it. It's very transactional because I'm talking to a machine. Yes, I know Google has pulled from all the human contributions, whatever, it's a machine. When I ask a person a question, I'm asking for knowledge shared in the context of relationship. I cannot be isolated, alone. I have to be in community to learn a thing. And do you know that people were never meant to be isolated and think they know things because they got them from a little box that talks to them? I've been reading a lot of Paul Kingsnorth lately. If you haven't, I'm a little bit of a doomsdayer now with AI and the internet. But when I ask a person a question, there's a back and forth. And part of that is I am always delighted, amazed, challenged, encouraged by the fact that this person has put something towards a craft or towards an interest or towards a course of study. And now they know something about God's world. It brings them joy and they're able to share it with me, with other people. And that makes me pause and think like, wow, isn't chemistry so neat in the kitchen when you're baking? Or wow, isn't color and coordination and design so beautiful? And the way it can communicate and change a room. Aren't these things really interesting? God made these things. Isn't it cool my friend knows these things? What respect can I give them for this? Like, this is amazing. That doesn't happen when I talk to a machine. And so I am probably getting on people's nerves a little bit, I think, because a lot of times people are like, you can just Google that. I'm like, but I want to hear from you. And it's interesting, even when you do this with a stranger, if you ask for something like directions, I've gotten a lot of funny responses. Another one of these is I get lost a lot. We'll go ahead and move there. Number 2, I get lost a lot. Like a lot. Yes, I'm going to buy a map. I'm gonna buy a map of my area and keep it in my car. We get lost a lot now, even if I have directions scribbled down on a piece of paper, which yeah, I know I got from Google, so I can't totally escape the machine. But I need directions when I go places that are new to me. And what's really fun is the first time it happened, my kids like panicked. They were like, we're lost in the middle of nowhere. We have no idea where we are, how we're supposed to figure it out. A street sign had come down. I eventually just backtracked till I was about at the right mile from where we had last turned. And guess what? We took our turn and we figured it out. But now my kids think that is an adventure. We get lost frequently and they're like, great, we have to problem solve. We have to figure it out. Okay, mom, we're explorers. That is very good for children to see a problem and think, I can fix this, or I can understand this, or I can try my best, and be willing to assess the risk, be willing to be frustrated, be willing to be late, be willing to have an inconvenience, and it not ruin me. I know adults who cannot fathom going anywhere in the city or outside of their normal places without access to a map in their pocket, because, well, what if they might get lost? Would that not be just the worst thing ever? It's actually not. And I've introduced this concept in a couple of videos, that it is good for us to suffer. It's not really suffering, but like meet difficulties, small difficulties regularly, because it builds out our ability to problem solve, to think and react, to respond, to handle frustrations without feeling anxious or worried or concerned. These are things my kids are now learning because I've chosen to forgo the smartphone. And guess what? Getting lost, we've learned so many new places around where we live, and we now understand how things connect. It's actually been really helpful. I love Windleberry. Place is always a character for Windleberry, and I think there is a problem when people no longer know their places. So back to the asking for directions thing. When I ask people for directions, I'm often met with, don't you have a smartphone? And I actually had an old lady laugh at me. And like, she was an old lady, like, you know, pushing 70 maybe, old lady. And I was like, this is where we are in life now? I'm being laughed at by an elderly woman because I don't have a smartphone. I'm asking for directions, which is just funny, but also no one knows. No one can tell me the names of the street, how to get anywhere. That's concerning. We are people made to be in places, made to be rooted, made to be connected to places. We were made for a place, and yet now we no longer think places are worth knowing. All the interesting things I'm wondering about these days. Okay, another one, which isn't too surprising if you were to know me in real life, or I guess keep up with a lot of the things I create. I'm very, very wary now of using the machine when I don't have to. One thing that Tish pulled out in our podcast and told me about is someone named Mark Barnes, which I did not know him previously, but have really enjoyed reading some of his work over the last couple of weeks. And he uses this distinction between a tool and a machine. And the way Tish described it is primarily the tool helps you do your work in a way that is better, and you can do better work, where a machine takes over you and does the work, or takes over part of the human requirement in work. And so, it's not really a thing you want happening. And so when I think about something like my podcast, which is back, by the way, season 3 started last week, so go check it out, that I no longer want to use the machine when I'm creating, because I don't want the machine to interfere with the human part of it. And so I've talked about before that Windleberry has said that he writes on paper and doesn't use the typewriter that his wife uses or a computer, because he likes the humanness of it. You can see his handwriting. You can see that he's crossed out things, moved things around, drawn notes up here. When you write something on a word processor, it looks pristine. It already looks like a machine did it. It's already exact, and you feel like you can't write a sentence and try it out, like you have to backspace it, or you can't edit it too much. It's just hard to see in the same way. I know not everyone's gonna agree with that, but it really struck me a couple years ago when I read that, and I tried to start doing things by hand instead of on my computer. So what I've noticed that for season 3, as I've been preparing things for the episodes for the podcast, I am not using the computer for my planning and my writing. I am writing by hand, and I am only using books. I'm not Googling things. I'm using the books that I've loved and I've read and pulling them all out. I'm flipping through them to find the thing I'm looking for, and it's been really enjoyable. And of course, then I go and I do type up my script. If you know, I include my transcript on my website for people who would prefer to read or would like to reference something later. It's like a resource I offer. But until I get to the actual recording part, I just don't touch it. And I do think that it's a bit of a gentle defiance, like an active gentle defiance. With the chat, what is it, GBT, whatever, people now are getting to the point where you're not gonna know if you're talking to a human, if a human has actually done something, or if it's been computer generated, automated, whatever. And it's already eking into things that I think are sacredly human in a sense, like writing eulogies for people who have died, absolving people of their sins as a robot priest, all sorts of things that I find alarming, and I'm just trying to push back. And the getting rid of the smartphone has definitely helped me be a little more like, actually, I have a question about that. Just because it's the norm doesn't mean it's good. Should we be doing that? Probably not. Okay, number 4. This is one that I've always wanted to do better with, but I don't know, there's a point where you can't pursue your ideals in everything. You just start to crumble because there are too many of them. So this one is shopping locally and shopping less. I love the idea of shopping locally, shopping small. A lot of times though, it is just more convenient to pull out your phone and order something from Amazon and get it in 2 days. You don't even have to move. You're like, that thing I needed. done. You don't have to walk through the city. You don't have to load the kids in the van and drive somewhere and load them out and take them in the store and all that. But without the smartphone, I don't have the option of getting on Amazon or even just online shopping. That's just not a thing I can do. Could I do it later on my computer? Yes, but I don't pull my computer out when my kids are awake or around. So it's just, I forget. And that's the second part of that. Things that I would have said, oh no, that Amazon thing was totally needed, babe. Super necessary. We needed that. I now forget to purchase by the time the evening comes around, and then I never purchase it. And so I've seen that I'm actually buying fewer things. I'm making do with what I can find around the house. And some of you probably have great habits of this already. Clearly I'm revealing that I did not, or at least they were worse than I thought. But it is something that I've just found has been really fun. I also think when you're offline and so you're not seeing things on Instagram or Pinterest or anything, you are just more creative in your own space. You problem solve better in your own space. Cal Newport talks about that with deep work. You cannot get into a good sense of problem solving, a good flow of thinking and assessing if you are constantly being interrupted by email pings, text pings, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, and it's ruining people's ability to do deep work. I applied that to motherhood immediately when I read that book. Like, what is it doing to moms engaging in their work in the home when they're constantly being pinged? And so this has just been one for me where I've noticed, oh, guess what? I'm able to have that space and that kind of incentive slash barrier of convenience. I can't do the convenient thing, so I'm going to just go choose to do the inconvenient thing cheerfully. And that's actually really helped me do something I've always wanted to do, which was be better about buying locally. And number 5, the very last one, is that I no longer think a cell phone is necessary. This probably sounds ridiculous to modern ears today. Not even that I'm saying you don't need a smartphone. That one I think most people can be like, yeah, I don't really want to give mine up, but I can see what you're saying. Like, I think you're probably right. You don't need that. But the idea of not having a cell phone at all is pretty shocking to people. Here's what happens. I no longer take it anywhere. Because it does not demand my attention other than when it rings, and as I've mentioned before, it doesn't ring that often because people don't like to call people anymore. I really don't remember to take it, which is funny because just 7 months ago, it was like, do I have my keys? Do I have my phone? Do I have my wallet? Okay, let's go. It was just something you had to have. I wasn't someone who always had it in my back pocket, but it was like, oh, you can't leave the house without this. There might be danger out there. You're gonna need it. You don't though. That's what I'm realizing. It's not that I'm trying to leave the phone behind, it just started happening. And I just would be out and realize, oh, I don't have my phone. Well, I hope my husband doesn't need anything. He probably doesn't, and if he does, I can always go back out later. Like, these are not big deals anymore. I know that people are gonna talk about safety. What if you break down? What if a car accident? Guess what? If you live in a country where you speak the language, you can ask someone who probably has a phone on them if you really need it. But I've seriously considered just putting a landline back in my house. I don't need a phone. It's not required for life. I'm wondering what else in my life is not required for life. So I'll be back to let you know if you have something that you no longer think is required, but is definitely a modern convenient norm. Let me know below. Otherwise, we'll see what happens with the dumb phone series. I've joked that I'm going to continue it until I have people in my real sphere give up their smartphones. I have a number of people on the edge, like they're looking at dumb phones online. So I feel like that is the type of influencing I could really get behind, and I'm gonna see what goodness keeps coming from this, and then maybe we'll wrap this up. But if you are someone with a normal phone, let me know what you think. Have you experienced these things? Have you seen the same observations? And do you think you even need it? I'll talk to you guys soon.